Hello, Patricia here, welcoming you back to the Poetry Pcast. This week, I'm going to be continuing with the theme of death poetry, which will be the topic for our submission period from the 1st to the 15th of April 2025. Hopefully, between this week and last week, you'll find inspiration to write those haiku or tanka to send to me. And remember, we're writing with an awareness of our own death, the knowledge that sooner or later, it's bound to happen. So maybe write something that you'd like to leave behind for your family. We are not writing about the death of loved ones. No, no, no. Any poems on that topic will not qualify for consideration. And speaking of submissions, make sure you've had a look at the video prompts this month, or whatever month it is that you're joining us, except December, of course, because we'll take a little break from prompts that month. Do leave your poems, and this is quite vital, leave your poems in the comments so Linda can read them and choose some to feature on a podcast and in the Poetry P Journal. All you need will be found on the Poetry P YouTube channel. Now, death poetry. I'm going to share some slides on the video version of this workshop, so you can see that on YouTube if you head along to our YouTube channel. Otherwise, I'll try and read things very slowly and carefully so you can catch them. Last week, we looked at 3 types of poetry. Poetry written when a person knew they were dying, the last poems that a poet wrote, unaware it would be their last poem, and poems that poets wrote, aware that death would eventually happen. The death awareness poems that I'm suggesting that you write. Do you remember the poet Narushima Chuachiro, who from the age of 50 regularly wrote his death poem and sent it to his poetry master, finally getting it more or less to the point that his mentor approved of it around the age of 80. For 80 years and more, by the grace of my sovereign and my parents, I have lived with a tranquil heart between the flowers and the moon. For 80 years and more, by the grace of my sovereign and my parents, I have lived with a tranquil heart between the flowers and the moon, is what he wrote and sent to his mentor. And remember, his mentor said to him, when you reach 90, change the first line. So today we'll take a look at some more interesting areas. One is a publication I found in which Japanese prisoners of war held in Japan and other countries who were tried for war crimes wrote their jisei before their execution. Another are poems written by those about to commit seppuku. And then, to lighten the mood, I hope, some poems from the ancient masters of our genre. So just a little warning, anyone who doesn't want to listen to poems on these tough subjects, seppuku being ritual suicide, maybe come back next week. For those of you who stay, I hope these poems will give you food for thought and, of course, the inspiration to write. Shall we start with seppuku? What is it? Put very simply, seppuku is suicide. It has a long tradition in the samurai warrior classes where honor was highly prized. So, if they'd messed up in some way that dishonored themselves or their families, they would perform the ritual of seppuku. Officially a rite for the samurai classes, it was outlawed, I believe, in 1873. But that doesn't mean it didn't occur after that date. I think some of the officer classes took their lives by seppuku after the Second World War to restore their honour and that of their families after Japan's defeat. I'm not going to go into detail here about what the ritual involves, but if you're interested, Mr. Google is your friend, and he'll help you if you'd like to know more. So let's hear some jisei written by men about to commit seppuku and maybe find out what brought them to that point. General Akashi Gedeu committed seppuku in 1582. His forces had been defeated in the Battle of Yamazaki, and though his army was outnumbered 2-1, he decided the only honourable path was seppuku. He asked his superior officer, Mitsuhide, for permission, but it was refused. However, Gedeu secluded himself and prepared to end his life, and this is his jisei. As I am about to enter the ranks of those who disobey, ever more brightly shines the moon of the summer night. As I am about to enter the ranks of those who disobey, ever more brightly shines the moon of the summer night. And that was translated by Mary Beth Graybill. And now some jisei from a couple of the 47 Ronin of 1703. Who are they? Well, they're 47 samurai who became Ronin, Ronin being samurai without a lord, on the death of their lord Asano Nagamori. Asano Nagamori was instructed to hold a celebration in honor of the emperor's messenger. And to help him, one of the emperor's officials was sent to teach him the etiquette for the occasion. But this official made the mistake of treating Nagamori with contempt, which he felt dishonored him, and not surprisingly, didn't go down too well. Nagamori drew his sword on the official, and although this official did not die, Nagamori was commanded to commit seppuku. This left Nagamori's samurai without a lord, and they were none too happy about that. 47 of them swore to avenge their lord, and biding their time, that's just what they did. In 1702, they killed the official that had slighted Nagamori and turned themselves in to their government. There was a bit of toing and froing about what to do with them, because there was a certain amount of sympathy for their action. But ultimately, as per the law, they too were ordered to commit seppuku. The winter fowl ends up with feathers plucked. The winter fowl ends up with feathers plucked. That was by Shumpan, written in 1703 and translated by Furuta Shokin. Surely there's a tea house with a view of plum trees on Death Mountain too. Surely there's a tea house with a view of plum trees on Death Mountain too. And that was by Shio, also written in 1703 and translated by Furuta Shokin. Takejiro Onishi, who died in 1945, was an admiral of the Japanese fleet, one of the main initiators of the creation of the Shimbun units, better known to us in the West as kamikaze units. After he surrendered, he committed suicide by seppuku. Apparently, the agony lasted several hours, during which he managed to show his dying verses to the adjutant. "Not bad for an old man?" he asked him. "In blossom today, then scattered. Life is so like a delicate flower. How can one expect the fragrance to last forever? In blossom today, then scattered. Life is so like a delicate flower. How can one expect the fragrance to last forever. Takejiro Onishi, 1891 to 1945, translated by Elena Savlakova. And the last person I'll talk about in this section is Yukio Mishima, who lived from 1925 to 1970. His real name, Hiraoka Kimitake. You might know him. He is one of the most prominent representatives of Japanese literature, a 3-time Nobel laureate. For 45 years, Mishima had a substantial influence on post-war Japan, taking an active part in patriotic motions. He was a writer, a playwright, innovator, actor, public figure, and author of the world-renowned bestsellers, some of which I've ordered from the library to read. He managed to become the personification of an idol during his lifetime, and if you search down some photos, he was a good-looking chap. You might also be able to find some of his work on film. The New Yorker did a piece about him this year, which you can read or listen to, and I'll add a link to the show notes. On November 25th, 1970, leaving behind his death verse and his final novel, The Fall of an Angel, Yukio Mishima publicly committed seppuku in the wake of an unsuccessful attempt at either calling for or attempting a coup d'etat. Accounts do vary, but from what I've read, most agree on an attempted coup. This is his verse. A small night storm blows, saying falling is the essence of a flower, preceding those who hesitate. A small night storm blows, saying falling is the essence of a flower, preceding those who hesitate. Yukio Mishima, 1970, translated by Elena Savlakova. And so we move to a fascinating, albeit dark, publication that I came to discover in my research, and I wanted to share it with you. I know this is going to be difficult for some of you, but sometimes I feel we shy away from the difficult, and in so doing, we fail to grow or understand the world in the round. Anyway, I came across an article written by Midori Sato and Christopher Reeves in Impressions. The article was called A Precious Life, Eulogy for the Poets of Sugamo, and it was written in 2014. As Midori Sato tells it, she came across this book of poetry by chance. A native-born Japanese living in the US, she was asked by Bill Barrett to translate a petition of a World War II convicted war criminal, which he wrote to a chaplain at Sugamo prison. For context, after World War II, the prison held 287 inmates, 23 of which were released, 217 were incarcerated, and I believe the last of them were paroled in 1958, and 45 were executed. Through her work on the translation of this petition, she became interested in the prisoners of Sugamo prison, and in conjunction with Bill Barrett, an anthropologist, she travelled to Japan and interviewed one of the prisoners, Tobita Tokyo. What she and Mr. Barrett found was a rare thing. 2 books, which were compiled, edited, and hand-printed in the prison at Sugamo in 1951. They were called Arakusa, or Wild Grass, and Sugamo. And it's Sugamo that I want to talk to you about today because it contains the jisei of Japanese war prisoners, whether they were in Sugamo prison or elsewhere in the world. Those prisoners condemned to death in Sugamo were held in a separate cell block 5. Whilst they were away from the general prison population, they did have cellmates, and apart from some final visitors, these were the people they shared their last days of life with. And I wondered to myself, is that how the poems were saved for publication? Anyway, before I share some of them with you, I should tell you that the editors Nashioka Hireo Kenichi, and Taniguchi Takagi intentionally selected the poems as a record of the lives of war criminals in Sugamo prison, not for the superiority of the verse. And also that due to a shortage of materials, the number of poems had to be limited. So naturally, many of them went by the wayside. So today I'm going to read a few of them to you. Ask not your mother where father has gone. He has no privilege ever to see you again. Ask not your mother where father has gone. He has no privileges ever to see you again. Yoshihara Tsuyoshi, from Sugamo, translated by Midori Sato, and it was written on the occasion of his death sentence. I should say that none of these poets that you're going to hear from now committed seppuku. They were all executed. Preparing for his death, Ideguchi Taichi wrote this. Not knowing we are parting forever, my child gives her small hand to her mother, waving. Not knowing we are parting forever, my child gives her small hand to her mother, waving. Ideguchi Taichi, from Sugamo, translated by Midori Sato. The clear light of tonight's rising moon as my remains. Come morning, my body shall fall away. The clear light of tonight's rising moon as my remains. Come morning, my body shall fall away. And that was by Kano or Sugano Yashutaka, from Sugamo, translated by Midori Sato. Now from poets that maybe weren't the best, to those that are acknowledged as the masters of their genre. Let's hear some of their jisei, or some of their zeku. I'm rather partial to a bit of Moritake. And R.H. Blythe in his History of Haiku says, there are many of his poems which are said to be his jisei, but Blythe chose this one. My lifetime, today it may appear like the morning glory, alas. My lifetime, today it may appear like the morning glory, alas. The poem often cited as Basho's death poem, although we know from last week that he was a man who was always prepared just in case, is this one. Sick on a journey, dreams roam about on a withered moor. Sick on a journey, dreams roam about on a withered moor. Basho, translated by Haruo Shirane. Now, as for Buson, I think he's written 3 poems, which rather than being jisei, could well be seen as zeku, the last poems he wrote. These are the 3 poems, in this case, translated by Chris Drake. Winter warbler on Wang Wei's hedge, so long ago. Winter warbler on Wang Wei's hedge, so long ago. Warbler, what are the small sounds you make in that frost-covered bush? Warbler, what are the small sounds you make in that frost-covered bush? Now the dawns are filled with white plum blossoms. Now the dawns are filled with white plum blossoms. There are many translations of that last one, but I think that's one of my favourites. Next up, Issa. This poem is often regarded as Issa's death poem, thought to have been written around 1812 and etched onto his gravestone. It was written before he died. Well, here it is, the place I'll die, 5 feet of snow. Well, here it is, the place I'll die, 5 feet of snow. Issa, translated by David Lanouille. Last, a poet who, as you know, I think is much undervalued. Shiki. And again, these 3 poems were written by his own hand in the hours before his death. Snake gourd has gone to flower, a Buddha have I turned, choked with phlegm. Snake gourd has gone to flower, a Buddha have I turned, choked with phlegm. A barrel of phlegm, snake gourd water, is just not enough. A barrel of phlegm, snake gourd water, is just not enough. Since the day before yesterday, not even snake gourd water has been collected. Since the day before yesterday, not even snake gourd water has been collected. Those are all Shiki poems and were translated, I believe, by Suzumu Takiguchi. So that's all I have for you on the topic of death poetry. I hope it wasn't too heavy a topic. Thank you to all of you who joined me for these last 2 podcasts. Do you know, despite the topic, I've actually enjoyed finding out about death poetry and tunneling through the various rabbit holes. Please do send us your death awareness poetry next month. Submission period again is the 1st to the 15th of April 2025. And remember, they're poems about the awareness of death, not poems about the death of other people. And you can write tanka or haiku, as is the tradition. We're happy to consider either form. So I'm off to travel down a few more rabbit holes, read some more sources suggested by my research for these podcasts. I'll also be writing some haiku, maybe even tanka, because I found this topic strangely inspirational. I hope you do too. So until we meet again next week, keep writing. And don't forget, there will be show notes on the website after this podcast and links for you to follow up to. And maybe you might think about becoming a member or buying us a coffee. Anyway, see you next week. Ciao.